Hi there, my name is Vera. My creator is making Kigurumi masks for more than 16 years, and today I would like to share with you some of my knowledge about Kigurumi mask paddings. This is the second part of the Kigurumi mask paddings video, and in this video I would discuss the placement of Kigurumi paddings, how to place them inside the mask, the different parts, how they affect the user experience, how they affect the process of making the mask, and what you need to consider when place a paddings in the certain areas, and how to actually structure those paddings inside the mask. So let's quick recap the first part of the video, and now the padding placement. The first about the padding placement is, well, there will be the face, the top, and the rear part of the mask. The facial paddings, the goal is to provide comfortable offset from the wearer's face and the mask surface and the elements inside the mask surface, and also to provide some room for ventilation. The best placements for the parts are the forehead part, a large forehead part, or a two smaller but also pretty big forehead part, and cheek parts. The cheek parts can be also be swapped with the respirator, and also there is a useful thing to add a layer of fabric or layer of thin but soft of the EVA foam, the one that is used for the yoga mats, inside or to the lower side of the mask. Also, you need to consider that those parts need to be thick enough so you will not bump your face into the mask surface. Well, for example, one mask from one of the makers was called at one of the Discord servers as a nose breakers, because they well, you know, the profile is pretty pointy, and the human nose is, well, is not like that. So you will need some room for your nose, but at the same time you cannot just move the mask face too far, because it not just would look awkward on you, but also the farther the mask would be from your face, the harder it will be to see through different openings in the mask. Well, there are several openings. For example, these small black dots are actually places where I see, and also I can see through my eyes, because it's glass eyes. But also some people make the slits right above the eyes, in inner part of top eyebrows, so something like that. And also there are eyes made of mesh, different kind of mesh, and the farther this stuff is from your actual face, from your eyes, then the harder it is to see through all that small openings, because openings are pretty small. So you need to balance that. The paddings need to be thick enough so you will not bump your face into everything that is going inside, but also not too far enough so you still can see. And also those parts provide some room for ventilation, because you actually ventilate in this area, and the parts do provide some place for this area to inhale, to exhale. So this is it. Then about the chin, about the chin area, the fabric at the bottom of the mask is useful if you may encounter cold weather, go outside, and well, if you breathe, there is a lot of trapped humidity in your air, in the air you're exhaling. And if there is cold weather, then your mask gets cold, and all that stuff gets condensated inside your mask, and then it gets down to your chin inside the mask, and then you can just and it gets pretty cold because the mask surface is cold, and then that stuff can get easily to your throat, and well, you may get a fever pretty quickly. But if you place something like a thin sheet of EVA foam or some layer of fabric, that fabric will dampen that effect and make it way easier in these cases. It still gets wet, but that wetness will not translate to yourself and will not affect your health so dramatically. What about the placement? And here you can see the placement in the mask. Well, for example, in one of my recent works, you can see this is the placement right here and on the top of the mask, on the forehead and on the cheekbones. This is from my experience, so this is the best variant, and because then when you consider the anatomy of your skull, this is the forehead bone, and the cheekbones are pretty close to the surface, and though it's very stable places to secure the Kigurumi mask against, so it's not very squishy, it's pretty stable, and making the paddings soft enough to so the blood flow is still not obscured at the places. It's a good solution. What about the nose pad? Well, right here you can add a nose pad, but if the forehead parts and cheekbone parts are done right, then you do not need it. So what's next? The next is the top parts. The top parts are the parts that basically are right here. Well, actually, the top parts, for example, on the other masks, well, this one is with respirator. It's pretty interesting to close. Well, when you put it on, you put the mask, you put the respirator, and then close the face. Well, and in this mask, you can see that we have these parts right here. There is a lot of going on under those parts, so the parts are pretty thin, and so there are some rigid structures under them, but the idea is that you have these parts a bit here and here. You can use one solid part, but having two parts gives you a little interesting advantage. There is a gap that is not useful for just for airflow, but also if you have a harder tie with a back zipper, you can pull your zipper runners to the head, to the top of the head, and there is a place for them to rest without disturbing yourself. Because if you have a single part, it can squish those zipper pullers against your head, and it may get uncomfortable after several hours of wearing Kigurumi mask. And having this room is pretty useful. Also, you can see that there are a cooler there and some wire for having a power bank. So it's there is an active cooling system in this mask, and it have a lot of room in the rear of the mask to accommodate all that stuff, and the paddings are basically put on top of that. top of some structures and paddings put on top of that structure. The size of the top paddings is dictated by the idea that the mask must be pushed down as much as possible. So why this is important? The further the mask is pushed up, the longer your face then looks. It looks like that your face is longer, and this is a good thing for the character. So you do not look like this. You look well, pretty nice, pretty fine. Your stature looks pretty fine. So these parts are the largest. Also, when these parts are going basically to the top, to a bit higher than the top of your ears. Well, not my ears as a character, but the ears of the wearer inside the mask, because it provides this enough support for the mask again. Remember that the mask may weigh about 2 kilograms. Sometimes it's usually a kilogram, may weigh more. So the larger support area, the easier it to bear that support, weight on top of your head. What does? But you do not want to move those parts too low. Because if you will move those parts too low, then they may squish your ears inside the mask, and you will get half deaf in this case. So your ears inside the mask should stay stay unpadded. The paddings should go around your ears. The gap in the center also should not be too much, because if it is small, for example a couple of centimeters, maybe 5 centimeters at most, then it's okay. But if it will be too large, then the mask can just get down and you will get through those parts, and well, that's not a good idea as well. And also, if the mask is 2/4 or 3/4 or 2/3 mask, that basically not a full head mask, but have a large opening in the back. Watch my video about mask shell types, by the way. So in this case, the top parts are basically the parts that go all the way to the edge of the mask and even some further outside of the mask, to have an extra support for the mask and also to prevent the mask from basically getting out. Then 2/3 or 3/4 also usually have some kind of belts to prevent it from getting off when you move like this. But for most of the stuff you will need that extra support, and also that extra support can support the wig itself to make the head more round at the rear side. Well, and the paddings and the back are usually for full head mask, that they are usually right here. The sole purpose of these parts are to squish you, to push your head, your face towards the front face parts. So it's the simplest part is just layers of foam thick enough to push you towards the parts and to secure the mask, to not let it jiggle around without your consent, but not too thick, so it will not be too uncomfortable. It's just enough amount of pressure. And also those paddings add some comfort when you try to sleep in your mask. Well, again, and there is, for example, this is example with the the top parts and the rear parts here. You can see, and also there are some side parts. Well, but mostly it's the top parts that work, and these parts are basically a kind of rear parts. Look at the rear parts. Also, there is reason to make some extra EVA foam, the soft EVA foam, around the lower side of the mask, same as here at the front, but this is mostly for the convenience of head tie, because it's just for making head tie live longer, because the mask is rigid, the head tie is soft, and well, rubbing it against the rigid part of the mask may not be too good for head tie. Also, this stripe of fabric or stripe of EVA foam can affect ventilation a bit, but if you have a full head mask, well, anyway, you have a lot to think about ventilation in the front part of the mask, so this is not a big deal anyway. Now about padding placements, one more thing to consider is that you may want to place pads everywhere inside the mask, and this is a mistake. Well, I did that mistake, I know. The mask feels incredibly soft, incredibly nice, incredibly cozy, but also incredibly stuffy, because there is no way for air to go anywhere except into the pads, and that makes the air too hot and too stuffy very quickly. So the thing is that you need to have some gaps between paddings to provide air circulation for basically for cooling purposes. For ventilation, for cooling purposes, something like that. Now about padding structures. The first thing is, for example, here is one of the cheek parts. Well, and the structure is the Velcro that is connected to the there is the mask surface, then with the soft, the fluffy part of Velcro, and this is the sticky part of Velcro on the pad. As I've said, that you need to place the sticky part of Velcro on the pad, because in this orientation it's less likely to damage your head tie when you wear your mask, when you place paddings, etc. Then there is maybe, for example, you may need or may not need the more rigid part. This is the EVA foam, EVA pad, the stuff you use to make, they used to make yoga mats or cosplay armor. And then there is the soft, squishy foam that is going towards the wearer face. Also, if you make it for someone else, you may want to cover it with some fabric. I use the same fabric that is used for making head ties. Also, there is some kind of, well, this kind of fabric. It's also good for pads. You may also make the whole pockets out of this kind of fabric for the pads inside of them. So it's a Velcro sewn to the pocket, and the pocket is made of tricot, and the foam is stuffed inside in layers. And also you can use different kind of foam. There is a stair foam, the standard foam. There is a HR foam, the very soft foam. and something like that. There is the rigid polyurethane foam, also an option in different ways. And the idea is that you put the softer foam towards the wearer and the more rigid foam towards the mask surface, and cover it all with the fabric. The forehead parts. The forehead parts in their structure is usually the most rigid parts because they need to maintain their shape. They not need to be very squishy. So the idea is to make the parts out of EVA foam or something like that, or even the rigid foam, and then put a thin layer of a soft, nice to touch foam on top of that. Do remember that these parts connect with your skin. Well, unless you are wearing the full latex without openings under the mask, so you will also want to have the layer of pretty soft, pretty nice to touch fabric on top of that part. So it's the layer of pretty soft fabric, then soft squishy, about 1 centimeter is enough of foam, and then the rigid foam that maintains its position and makes it in place. So something like that you may see in kimono fursuit hats. On the first part of this video there is a photo about it, and also the same thing is true for the cheek parts, but the cheek parts can have a larger amount of soft foam on them, about 2, 3, 5 centimeters. So they are not that much important. It's important for them to get to the surface of the face, more than to just prevent it from moving. So the cheek parts, well, so you can see here, you can read it if you want. Well, it's usually a square with a chopped corner, something like that. Well, and the thing about these parts, the important thing is that you will probably want to adjust the cheek parts position. Cheekbone part position is not optimal when you make the mask, when you wear the mask first. So, well, you would like to fiddle with this part a lot. So, well, again, you can see, well, here and here. Well, this is the eyes. Well, here you can see this part where they are usually placed. The next, the top parts. The top parts are, as I've mentioned, are the largest parts. They are made to push your mask up. So they are usually made of a standard foam, standard rigidity foam, or made of even a rigid foam. And those parts are usually accommodate some places for mechanisms, some electronics. So the most of the electronics in the mask goes on top because there is the most of the room there, above the forehead part and on top of the mask and on the side of the mask, like here. So there are the most of the room in the mask. So these parts are usually pretty rigid, so it may be the most of them may be made of EVA, maybe wood, maybe formed polyethylene, and this stuff can be even glued to the mask shell, and only the soft the soft, most close to the Vera's layer is actually of a soft foam. About 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter foam is okay for this stuff. And since the pads on the top are usually rest against head tie, not against your actual skin, then you do not need to cover this pad with a soft fabric. You can use soft EVA as an interface layer. You can use different kinds of fabric as an interface layer, because you probably will not feel that this fabric, you will feel just the pressure. And of course it's useful to make these as pockets as well, to be able to adjust the squishiness of those parts and the thickness of those parts, because these two parameters affects how comfortable it is to wear the mask. So again, and the rear parts. The rear parts is the most simple. It's just a foam, maybe foam put in the pockets. The foam made of standard foam, HS foam. HR foam is a memory foam. It's very soft. But do not overuse it again, because it is very squishy and you want to add it more and more and more, and it builds up the pressure, and too much pressure is uncomfortable. But again, the rear parts are used in the full head masks, and the sole purpose of this part is to just push the mask towards the user face and make it more equalized on top of the head. So you will not look like this. You will look pretty much like that, and also this secures the mask position. It's not wobbly. So this is the easiest part then in the mask, actually, by structure, because basically the cubes or rectangles of some foam put to the back of the mask. Well, this is for the parts, for the part perspective. It's mostly area. It's mostly all of that. All that I wanted to tell you about Kigurumi parts. So thank you for watching. I hope that my knowledge was useful to you, and maybe in the future you will come up with your own solutions and your own ideas about how to better place Kigurumi parts, how to better split those Kigurumi parts. Well, for example, to accommodate the zipper in back entry header ties. For example, that's why I split the parts to the left and right parts of the inner mask. Well, basically like every brain is split into left and right part. And also how to accommodate ventilation. Maybe there will be some breakthroughs with thermoplastic elastomers in the future, with foamed TPU, for example. There may be a new shapes of parts. Also, the more integrated structure of parts with variable rigidity. So something like that. But today, this is what my experience is. The result of my experiments, the result of my knowledge. So thank you for watching again. There will be the link to the first part of the video in the description, as well as you can find another videos regarding Kigurumi Mask tech on my channel. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.